Hello, everyone, and welcome to Court of the Rings on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. I'm Lotro's community manager, Cordovan, and I've got a guest with me this week. We have got producer Raninia. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's Friday. It's a bit of
Yeah,
a quiet day, so I'm
yeah,
enjoying that.
yeah. Update 30 is out. We had our patch on that this week. We've got a bunch of things we can talk about. So about a week ago, you posted a thread on the forums just sort of saying, hey, let's do some Q&A. And I think today's show is largely going to be going through those forum questions. So if you're watching live in chat, it's not that we're not going to get to your questions maybe, but it is mostly, it's really going to focus on these forum questions this time around. This particular time around here today. So just kind of a thought, a thing we're doing here. So sit back, relax, and enjoy if you'd like. I did want to remind people, though, before we totally get going, that we do kind of have something awesome going on, and that is the new Midsummer Festival stuff. Up to and including
Chipmunk pets.
new pets, chipmunks, a whole bunch of musical instruments, whole bunch of cosmetic items and housing items and things like that. So that's going to be running through July 5th. And it's available now in game, and yeah, you can just go check it out. The Midsummer Festival. Hope you're enjoying it. I know we've got some pretty cool stuff. I have a few screenshots I can probably pop up just for a little visual variety throughout the stream here today, and so maybe we'll just take a look at some of those item screenshots. Screenshots. Those are different. Screenshots from the Midsummer Festival there. So there you go. All right, thanks everyone for being here. So, how do you want to kick this off then? In terms of Raninia, do you want to kind of give some parameters here? Or do we just want to go with question number 2?
I'm happy to start this off. So just to note for chat, I won't have the chance to really look at chat just because I'm going to be thinking about these questions and looking at those primarily. Cord has graciously stepped in to focus on that, and he'll chime in when you folks have stuff that you're curious about the questions that I'm answering. Just to list out ground rules that I threw on the forum thread. I can't announce stuff. I'm sorry. I would love to. There's cool stuff coming, but I can't really talk about it. I'm happy to talk about the stuff that I can talk about though. But if you're like asking me when is X going to happen, I'm probably not going to be able to tell you. I can't really talk about stuff that happened before I got here. Just when we're talking about generalities around, why didn't X happen or why didn't this thing get fixed for a while? The answer is I don't really know. So I'm just not the right person to answer those questions, and I'm not going to be able to help you. And finally, I can't talk super deeply about specific design or feature choices just because a lot of those things are things that are outside of my realm of expertise. I can talk in more generalities around, class balance or stuff like that, but I can't tell you, okay, why did telling mark get reduced or why are guardian bleeds the way they are or whatever, because that's not something that I'm focused on thinking on. It's what other people are doing. But yeah, so I'm going to dive into that. Let's start with the first questions here from David Mead Hal. Asking first, would there be any chance of increasing the number of slots in the wardrobe or revamping the wardrobe? There's so many different outfits now, and they passed the 310 slot limit. So to say broadly, yes, there's definitely is a chance of increasing that. It's something that I think that we think is really valuable. The fact that players have all these cosmetic options, and we do think that's something that we can explore more of. I mean, frankly, like we have cosmetics in the store, and if you've already hit your 310 slot limit, those cosmetics aren't doing anything for you, and that's really not great for us regardless. So it's something that I need to dive into and understand a little bit more in terms of where the limitations around that are. Like, it's a technical issue, is it a design issue?
We are currently facing a little bit of a technical issue on the additional wardrobe slots. Mostly, we would need to do a little bit of UI squishing in that wardrobe space, but that's a solvable problem. But the one that's a little bit trickier is it does have kind of a performance impact. The amount of space that you have available and things like that, and so we have to be very careful offering more than what we currently do. So that's kind of been a little bit of the slowness in terms of why not just offer another 20 of them or something like that, right? Is there is a performance element to that, and that largely is where we are. But as you said, I was in those meetings. We've talked about them, so. Yeah.
We want to do this. It's just a question of what's the cost and when is the right time to do it. Honestly, I think actually I'm going to take a note around this and try and figure out if this is something we can pick up next year. To go to the second question, before we scroll down, sorry, just the any chance of getting a 9 cosmetic slot, that is something we're actively investigating right now. I don't know for sure yet. We might be able to do this very easily, or we might not be able to do this very easily, but we're looking into it right now. So yeah, let's move on to Joe Dan God. Got a number of questions, so this
Maybe,
is
how
gonna
about I
take a
ask
little
some
bit
of the
longer.
questions and you do the answers? Does that sound all
Sure.
right? All right.
Let's do it.
Updates in regards to improving Lua functionality, be it through bug fixes or expanding support.
So this is something I think I mentioned in a previous stream, or maybe it was in the forums. Just to reiterate, we are planning to have a discussion in the next few weeks around improving Lua functionality. There's definitely a good chunk of the team that feels really strongly that's something we should be more focused on. That said, we need to understand what that really means. Like, improving is sort of a general thing. Like, what is the level to which we're improving? What is the kind of support we're talking about adding? Right? What are the things that we're trying to support that we don't currently support specifically? So it's about figuring out a more concrete plan that we can then take and figure out the scoping of and say, okay, if we want to add like logging, for example, what is the cost of doing that? What are the design implications? What are the social implications? And then scoping that out and saying, okay, when is a reasonable place where we can do this? And then comparing that against the list of stuff that the folks involved with that would need to also do to make sure that it's not taking over something that's more important. But that's broadly speaking. It's something we're actively considering, but I don't have anything to announce right now.
We had the Lua functionality initially came really as I guess you could call it a pet project, in that it was really a couple of engineers in that from back in the day who were like, no, let's just do this. I don't care if I have to come in this weekend. And they just did it, basically. And so we've been having that initial functionality and support somewhat more piecemeal, I think, over the years. And I think what you're talking about is, maybe we should start doing that more formally here in the future.
Yeah, we would like to do something, but it's just a question of what is that something and when does that something happen.
All right, so are there any plans to update the UI in general?
Oh my god, yes. This UI has not changed dramatically in a long time. I don't like it. I'm a vocal proponent for updating the UI, not just for having scalable UI for bigger monitor resolutions and up to 4K, and I mean 8K is coming soon to more folks. But just generally speaking, this UI is really old. It's not really intuitive. It's not super player friendly. It's something that we all sort of get accustomed to, not because it's something that is good, but because it's what we need to get accustomed to. And I know lots of folks use plugins to change stuff about their UI, and I know there's a lot of customization options in there, but still just that the general basic player experience for someone who is just trying to play the game normally should be better than it is right now. So yes, I don't have strong answers for you around that right now. Some of that is going to require probably additional people to come in and help us out with that. And it's going to be a big project because changing the UI for a 14-year-old, 15-year-old game is not a simple, easy thing.
No, you're talking about a very big project. You are.
My hope is that we can do it piecemeal and start rolling out pieces over time. But we'll see how feasible that is. I don't want us to sort of wait to do all of it because that might be like a 5-year thing. But if there's limitations around that, then we need to understand them. We don't fully understand them right now, but we're in the process of getting better understanding of that stuff. The reality is that a lot of the code base that the folks who made a lot of those decisions are no longer around and haven't been for a while with the team. So we need to, as we bring in new folks, we need to get them up to speed on that stuff, and that takes time.
All right, so what about all the lag work? What are we doing?
So one of the things that we changed actually earlier this week was we reconfigured Evernight. I think it was either earlier this week or last week. I don't remember if Sev mentioned that on his Q&A stream.
It was this week, actually.
It was this week.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thank you, Cord. We haven't seen people complaining that it's worse since we did it, which is good. But it's hard to tell right now if it's gotten better. We're doing more testing and evaluation around that. Other lag work, I think Seb mentioned that we're looking at acquiring new hardware. That's still in the works. We don't have it yet, but we're still in the process of trying to get it. We're hopeful that will improve stuff as well. We're also continuing to transition some back-end stuff that we're hopeful will continue taking bites out of this apple. And on the engineering side, not on the front end engineering side, I should say, we're also looking at opportunities to improve performance in other ways, like improving the qualities of our checks, reducing the amount of stuff that needs to be detected, for example. There's lots of little things that we're doing along the way that, in and of themselves, don't seem like they are huge pieces, but we're hopeful that it's, we're taking a lot of different swipes at this, trying to get as many pieces as possible as we're going through and learning these systems and understanding where some of these pieces may be falling down. We fixed like an LI, not an LI, excuse me, a really bad lag causing skill not that long ago, which was really nice to see. Sometimes they're really easy like that, where it's like, oh, hey, we can just pinpoint this one thing. Unfortunately, that's not always the case.
And unfortunately, there's never the one fix, right?
There
is no lag toggle, unfortunately, right? So
no, this is a death by 1,000 paper cut
Yeah.
situation. This is 15 years of lots of decisions that were made at the time that seemed totally reasonable, but are put us in a successively smaller set of boxes.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Speaking of a progressively smaller set of boxes, how's the legendary item rework going?
So Cord and I were just in a meeting where we were talking about that, literally just before the stream went live. I think that it's coming along really well. There's definitely still things to shake out. I think that there's a couple pieces that I'm concerned about. Not super concerned, just like, this could go in a way that I think is less optimal, basically. But like, that's, everyone has that kind of stuff. But it's been good discussions. It's going in a really good direction. We're making really good progress on it. I think that the system is going to be one that is a definite upgrade over the previous one. I'm pushing for, and I'm getting, I shouldn't say I'm pushing. We are pushing for something that is going to be a lot more player friendly, a lot less grindy, and a lot more something that, we don't like that when players get further into it. When you get into like the level 80 and 90 and 100 and 110 stuff, as you get into the imbue things, you can get into a situation where like the game gets really hard because we're not giving you enough stuff to properly upgrade your LIs, and so that they become less valuable and actually just really frustrating to work with. And that's something we're actively working to get away from, and make that experience such that if you're a normal player just playing through the game, leveling up a character or leveling up your LI, you're going to have a decent, not amazing, but like not something that's you're going to look at and be like, this is the reason why I'm dying all the time. So it's going to continue to go. My hope is that maybe in the next month or so, we'll be able to start showing stuff off publicly, depending on what we want to do specifically. But I think that is a reasonable objective.
Yeah. What can we say more about Shadowfax and Treebeard? I think actually as of the time of this, when this question was originally written, we had not actually said as much as people know about at this exact moment. So Shadowfax and Treebeard is, the new servers coming up this summer. We have not announced a deadline, but it's pretty close. It's getting here. And weeks. And we've got a bunch of work related to, like, say, screenshots and promotional stuff. We're going to have a kind of a landing page for it at lotro.com legendary. Yep, we're updating that webpage. And a few things like that. But I guess in general, I don't know exactly. I don't want to take too much time kind of re-going over what it
I won't reiterate stuff.
Yeah.
There is one thing I called out on the forums because I saw a lot of confusion around this. So our intention with Shadowfax and Treebeard is that these will eventually become permanent live servers, but they're just going to take time for them to get to that point with the content. The Shadowfax will get there a lot faster than Treebeard will. Initially, we will not be offering transfers off of Shadowfax and Treebeard to the other live servers, just as we didn't for Andor and Ithil. But once they get closer to that point, we will open that up. We don't have like a firm date of where that is or a clear expectation right now. Shadowfax will get there sooner than Treebeard. That's basically as much as I can really say at this point.
Yeah.
Other than that, everything else I think has already been talked about before. And yeah, Cord will share news soon, I hope. I think in the next week
should be
or so.
real soon. I've got some tasks today related to getting it closer to being ready to publish, so there we go.
Awesome.
Is there anything cool we've totally forgotten to ask about? We'll have to save that one till the end, I guess.
The answer is yes, but I won't tell you what it is.
Yes. Just in the interest of time, let's move on to question number 3. Is that okay?
Sorry,
Let's
Joden got a number of questions.
yeah, let's skip the bonus questions there. Okay.
Yeah.
Why are housing items locked behind lucky instance drops? I believe what Wisp Song is probably referencing is that we have some new housing items in Update 30 here that you can get in the content. Why only the one way to get them?
So there's a number of reasons for that. The short version is that we don't have a ton of items that all players tend to want, and housing items tend to be an item that is generally pretty exciting for most players, and so we want to give opportunities to find that stuff throughout the world. So that means, sometimes landscape, that means reputation stuff, that means quests, that means instances, etc. We want to give players who prefer different types of content different opportunities to get that stuff. I can't say specifically with U30 stuff why that decision was made with those specific items, but that's the general philosophy.
Yeah.
I think that there's definitely things that I need to learn more about how that system works to really have better opinions around it. But
I would need to look up, but I don't think it's unheard of for us to put housing items as rewards and content in general.
No, I think we've done that for a while.
Yeah.
I think this person is asking specifically about U30. Just
the latest example, Egorth and the Woe of the Willow, their quest chains attached to these instances. Why is there not a choice for one of them after finishing it, I guess? So rather than having it as an instance reward, put it in like the quest chain rewards, things like that.
Yeah. So just to give different places to get that kind of stuff, we don't want there to be a thing where like, okay, if I want to get housing, then I only do quests, or if I want, then it's only do missions or only do instances or something. We want to sprinkle that stuff around. So there's a variety of stuff so that different players can get different stuff in those different environments and provide and feel value out of them. I understand that not every type of content is for everybody, so there might be rewards you want that are difficult for you to get to, and I get that, but we're trying to serve a broader audience here.
I'm trying to figure out a way to kind of shorthand that paragraph sentence and
I think they bolded their first question.
Okay, so I just want to know if you are willing and able to balance, that would be basically level capped experiences from 0 to 75 with additional tiers of difficulty, all 6 people raids for level 50 to 75, giving tier 3 to those without tiers and tier 5 to those that already have a tier 3. So I think this is really a question, what about retroactive work?
Yeah, this is like stuff that we already released for SOA or Moria or Isengard. Are we willing to go back and sort of update those to sort of fit with the modern stuff that we've shifted to? The answer is yeah, we're totally willing to do that. That's something that I believe we sort of did with the anniversary event, or maybe it was Wildwood, where we sort of updated an older dungeon, and it's something that we're looking to do in the future as well. I think that we have a lot of this awesome content that players enjoyed, and there's definitely opportunities for us to go back, revisit that, and sort of freshen them up and give them an update. I think the tricky thing is that like a lot of our instances are very bespoke. And the older ones, were built with sort of different philosophies and technologies that are now that sort of we don't use as much or have been updated a lot. And so we have to be careful about some of that old stuff, because if we touch it too much, we could push it over and it could all fall apart. But generally speaking, yeah, that's something we're totally willing to do. It's just about finding the right place for it. Anniversary is kind of a good place for it.
How this is a pretty loaded question, let me say there, Nubya. But how long until we destroy champions by removing weapon swapping?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I can't give dates.
Yeah.
But what I can say is it's not our intention to destroy champions. Weapon swapping is still something we're talking about. We don't have anything to announce specifically. Suffice to say that if we are going to make changes to the way that classes work, like if the LI revamp in general, then we are going to have to spend time to rebalance those classes. Mm-hmm. We're going to do a lot of that work internally, then we're going to do it in Palantir, and then we're going to do it again on Bull Roar. And then I can promise you, no matter how much stuff you folks bring up to us and find out about, there's still going to be new things that pop out afterwards once that update comes to live. So our plan is to just be, like we have it in the schedule, it is planned that as we learn more information, we're going to continue iterating on this thing. It's not a one-time thing. So we're not going to destroy champions. We might make them not as good temporarily, but that's not a long-term thing. And when I say temporarily, I'm talking about, months at most, not years.
And about weapon swapping, though, is something that I know that we have an interest in reducing the amount of weapon swapping that is currently taking place.
Yeah, we don't love weapon swapping because it's a really high-level thing. And it creates a lot of unintended consequences with the way that the ally system was created. The idea was not that like players would cast specific buffs on themselves or debuffs on a boss while having specific weapons equipped. And so that's something that we're looking at, because if the way that it's currently set, we have to account for that in our instance design, especially on higher tiers. And that basically just creates a vicious cycle where, players are going to keep doing it because we're balancing around it, and we're going to keep doing it because players are going to keep doing it. So we want to break that cycle. How we're going to break that cycle specifically, I don't know. That part of that could be that we just, you can still weapon swap, but like the value is lessened. Part of that could be we get rid of weapon swapping entirely. I don't have the answer for you right now. I don't know that we will even do it necessarily when we introduce the new allies. It's still something we're talking about, but that's something that we are talking about.
About Bullroar Forums Update 30 preview, a change to Frostlore's animation. Is that coming sooner rather
That's
than
unfortunately
later?
something I can't really
I don't know
answer
about that
there.
one either. I remember seeing that, but I don't know if that's going to be in a point update or maybe update 31. Yeah. Lore
Yeah, I
Master
think it's something that
Pets.
Bastion is still aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are looking at Lore Master Pets. I don't think so. Lore Master Pet's actually something we had a class balance discussion this past Tuesday, and it's something that we are going to be focused on specifically with the Lore Masters. The hope is that that's something that will be ready in about a month or two, but we don't have any specific stuff to announce around it.
I think you
And
just
seeing that last
jinxed it.
question,
I think you just jinxed it there. Yeah.
I'm the producer, Jerry. I can jinx it all the time. I plan stuff, and that jinxes it inherently.
All right. So, what about that brawler preview?
The brawler preview, yes. So I'm doing a brawler playtest this coming Wednesday, I think, unless I have a meeting that takes me out of it. But that's an internal playtest. Brawler's come a long way. It's doing great. A lot of the animations are in, which is super cool to see. But we're still sort of iterating and playtesting and learning stuff. I think that end of I should say like mid-July is probably the soonest that we would do something in terms of a preview. I would love to get players hands-on time with that, a good amount more than we traditionally do for our bull roars, just because this is a new class and there's a lot more stuff here. But I don't have a date for that yet. I think that probably the soonest for a hands-on would be August, realistically.
You've probably read through question number 9 more fully. I see basically a couple of questions about details related to how the LI update will work, specifically related to like imbuement and frequency of appearance. Right now, you get an awful lot of those third agers in your inventory and, things like that. I think that's really what question 1 is probably related to. How much do you want to tackle any of that LI stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, we're discussing this stuff, and it's not 100% settled yet. But generally speaking, we want legendary items to feel legendary. We want them to feel like a thing that you found this amazing artifact, basically, that you are, building around. And it's probably going to be a case where it's something that you are more attached to than you have been to your LIs and PILIs.
That said, I can't imagine a scenario where we're going to make it particularly difficult to get the base item. So,
no, that's not the expectation. It's
yeah.
a pretty core system to the game. I'm pushing for us to do it relatively painlessly, however painlessly we can define it. And then people are generally on board with that. It's just a question of like figuring out like how do we actually do that specifically.
All right. Well, so then about the new servers, perhaps around the end of June, huh? Something like
Perhaps.
that. Yeah, perhaps. Is it anticipated the servers will be rolled out at that time, or will that come later? Will it be weeks, whatever? Is the current plan to have them similar to Ithel and Enor, with both having a level cap? So what about the level cap idea for these worlds? Are we bringing in a level cap on them?
We are, yeah, we are
Yep.
following the same sort of trajectory that Anor Nithal followed. We'll be starting with the SOA and then eventually, introducing Moria. The difference primarily between these two will be the fact that Shadowfax is faster and Treebeard is slower. Shadowfax is going to be faster than live, and Treebeard is going to be much slower than live. So
Yep.
Shadowfax will get updates more frequently, generally speaking, than Treebeard does.
Shadowfax is somewhere around the range of plus 50% XP, and
Is
Treebeard
that
is
high?
somewhere in the range, yep, and somewhere in the range of, well, you get 40% of your regular XP, which is also a negative 60% XP. Kind of depends how you want to look at it. But I think technically we're using negative 60% XP over on the Treebeard side. So.
Yeah, and that's intentional. To give, we're seeing like how do players feel about that, right? Like we know Storm of the Tortoise is a popular thing, and that there's a lot of players who really are passionate about, wanting to level through a zone and experiencing it at the level that it's supposed to be and not over leveling it. So we expect a lot of those players on Treebeard. We also think there's going to be interesting stuff with Shadowfax, where players really wanting to blitz through and race each other and stuff like that. And we'll see how that turns out. It's totally possible that these are both super successful and tons of players on both, or one of the servers outpaces the other. Either way, we're in it for the long haul on both of them.
Do you want to tackle the character name question?
I unfortunately don't have a good enough understanding on this to really give you a useful answer. I think right now our focus around this sort of thing is, I think Steph mentioned it last week. We want to give players the ability to resurrect old characters from Dark Worlds. I know that tech is in testing right now. We had some issues that we ran into earlier this week, but we were able to successfully resolve the ones that were blocking us. So it's continuing to test them and get us further along. Hopefully that's available soon. But I think that's our primary focus around old character names at the moment.
We did have a change a while back in the way that we handle names related to transfers. In the past, the archival system and who got the -1 has changed in recent years. I am not aware of any plans to further change it, whether that be to change it back to how it used to be, or perhaps do something new there. But if we were to do anything like that, certainly we would end up putting that in, like, say, previews and release notes, things like that. But my understanding is the existing name policy as it exists today is going to be the name policy for the foreseeable future. So
yeah, I think that's a reasonable thing to say.
Yeah. Can we expect the next big raids loot to be planned differently from Remerchance? Can we expect to have different drops from different bosses and worse, or different drops from side bosses than from the rest of the raid?
So first of all, thank you so much for explaining the difference between those two things, because I definitely did not understand the specifics of Remerchance loot, so that was super helpful. I'm still learning. I'm getting further, but I'm still learning. The answer right now is I don't know. The raid planning is still in its pretty early stages, and so we're not super committed yet to what specific direction we're going to take. So folks have really strong feelings about that. I think that'd be cool for us to see on our various channels, so that we can take that into account when we make our decision, but we haven't made one yet.
Is there a hope related to legendary items that someone can get back to the game and not face an insurmountable grind?
Yes. Yeah, that is really intentional with the way that we're rebuilding the system, is that we want it to be much more feasible for someone to come in and actually play the game. As someone who is coming in and playing the game relatively recently, I'm very invested in that personally. I want to be able to get to cap and not feel like I'm having a really crappy time along the way. The way that we're going to be doing that is with a couple different ways, but like the biggest one is just like the current system is pretty punitive in a lot of different directions, and we just want to reduce that the way that it's set up there. I can't speak to the specific stuff around there, but I think that there's going to be general improvements around that That maybe not be to everybody's hopes, but it certainly will be improvement, and that's what we're aiming for to start with.
The next set of a couple of questions relates to kinship updates in particular. What are the current obstacles in terms of updating the way kinships work in game? With the size of a lot of kinships getting larger, a new player surge expected, etc., can we expect any updates to the way kinships work in terms of organization, custom ranks, kin banks, etc.?
Yes, you absolutely can expect updates. You should not expect those updates to be for U31 and probably not this year, but it is something that we want to take a closer look at for next year. I think that there are a number of cool opportunities for us, and it's something that we know that other games in our portfolio are looking at that we want to learn about as well. So I don't have any specifics for you as to what those things are right now. We're sort of in the early brainstorming planning for that kind of thing, but next year seems like a reasonable guess.
All right.
And thank you for including those suggestions. Definitely
yes.
something we'll take a look at.
I don't know. Currency caps. They've kind of been in
Currency
since
caps.
free to play, right?
I hate the currency cap. Let me put it that way. I think the currency cap made a lot of sense when the game went free to play 10 years ago. That was a reasonable approach at the time. I mean, reasonable is probably being somewhat generous, but it at least made sense. That was sort of the way that free to play was still sort of viewed at that time. Mobile free to play was still relatively early. Western side, Lotro and DDO were the first major games to go free to play from being previously subscription. Obviously, in the Eastern markets, there's been a ton of free to play work up until that point, and they were way ahead, and they still in a lot of ways are. Currency caps are one of those things that I want to get rid of because I don't think that they provide any real value. That's probably something that we're going to be able to do sooner rather than later. My hope is before the end of this year. Part of it is just like it's wormed its way into a lot of different stuff, so it's not as just as simple as like giving everyone a thing or turning it off because there's a lot of fun stuff in there. But it is something that I'm definitely not a fan of, and it's something that broadly within the studio, no one is super much a fan of. Now, there are exceptions to this. So when you're talking about some alternative currencies, we do intentionally want to constrain the amount that you're carrying because we want to encourage you to spend those currencies, basically. The reality is that if we create a currency and you can carry as much as you want forever, then at a certain point, if we try and introduce new stuff using that currency, then we basically run into the behavior where players who've been gathering it for ages can just buy everything all at once and they don't have to engage with the system at all. Whereas new players still have to sort of go through it, and that's not an ideal thing. So for some currencies, we do want to maintain a smaller cap on them. That's not a monetization thing. That's a design thing intentionally, so that currency is more liquid. It's some of these probably are going to change as we re-examine some of that stuff, but I don't think that aspect of currency is going to change dramatically moving forward. There definitely will be currencies in the future where the caps will be smaller theoretically than you might necessarily want, but it will be still reasonable enough that you can buy some stuff, and that's fine, right? Like the goal is that we're giving you currency to buy things with. So if we're not creating valuable things for you to buy, that's a problem. We need to fix it, and if players are hitting their currency cap, that's a sign to us that that's happening.
Let me flip the bad juju's question here around then with the last one. What about gold sinks? There's also lots of people on the other side of that, right? Where it's just like gold is fairly insignificant.
Right, and that's a big issue. Makes the economy really illiquid and makes it really bad for new players who can't reasonably compete with the inflation that's happened in the wider economy. Yes.
Let me just interrupt, though, just briefly to say that this is not a Lotro-specific issue.
No, this is an every MMO and every game issue kind of thing.
Especially one with some level that's been going on for a while. So yeah.
The problem is that like impactful, quote unquote, is in the eye of the beholder, right? Like if we made, I don't know, let's say we made housing super gold sinky more so than whatever it is right now. Some players who don't engage with housing wouldn't see that as an impactful gold sink because it doesn't really affect them. Whereas the players that it would be affected would be really feeling that point. So we need to find ways to do it that is impactful without being punitive to wider groups. And that doesn't mean that we wouldn't ever do something like, hey, let's make this particular feature more gold sinky, but we do want to understand how that affects the wider player base. And so it's not something as simple as introduce. I remember, long time. I played RuneScape for ages, 15 fucking years ago at this point. Sorry for swearing. Sorry.
Sorry. I
15 years ago. It's a bad habit. Got to break it. 15 years ago, and I know that when they introduced housing, that was a super big gold sink for them, and it was really effective at first, but then it sort of didn't really super pan out long term. The problem with a lot of these gold sinks is that like we have to keep updating them and introducing stuff. Otherwise, players once they clear that gold sink, it's basically a tax, and then they have to they never will encounter it again. So we have to find ways of making it more residual within the game so that it affects players, but not so much that a new player coming in is basically blocked from doing something that they want to do.
To be fair, related to the profanity, we live in Boston, in the Boston area, and that is almost taught in elementary school at this point.
I mean, basically.
You will hear it every day, constantly. Anyway, okay. Anything else? I guess we kind of mentioned the classic server related to legendary. We're always doing different legendary worlds, right? So the idea of a more formal classic is never off the table. It's just not what we're doing right now.
I think that's a good way of putting it. The question, is it possible? The answer is, it is not impossible, but it is extremely difficult. There's a lot of things that would have to be done to get that to its place. I know a lot of folks use WoW Classic as an example of like the way that this can be done. WoW Classic is incredible. Like, it's frankly astonishing to me the work that they did to port that game into a newer engine, getting everything, like their trees were in wrong places, mountains had moved, like there's a ton of work. We just aren't equipped to do that right now. It's something that we would love to do. There's a lot of nostalgia for the game, and for what the game looked like, when it came out 14 and a half years ago. But it's not something, unfortunately, that we have the capability right now, and that's just the reality of it.
On the plus side, I think we actually have a positive answer to this. Is there interest in creating more difficult zones on live servers? They are suggesting fellowship quests or elite masters. Depending on what happens here, the stuff that's debuting on Shadowfax and Treebeard could eventually go to the live worlds.
Yeah, I think they're talking about not just the difficulty options, though, but just like having zones that are more difficult. Like, I know Mordor was generally seen as being more difficult than a lot of surrounding areas. The answer is there is interest. The tricky aspect of it is we want to avoid creating situations where players feel like they have to engage with more difficult content, because the reality is that for a lot of players, difficult content isn't what they're there for. They have stuff that they enjoy, and they're totally entitled to that, and that's understandable. But I get that there's a desire for more difficult aspects. I think that that's something that we can explore and think about for the future as we move forward, but it's not something that we're doing in the short term.
The next question probably is as much a question to me as you, but I'll let you tackle it. What are some ways SSG can modernize our approach to how we handle content creators and the use of social media in general?
So first of all, I want to say, Bloodborne, appreciate your streams, and I've been enjoying some of your YouTube stuff, and I know you're in Twitch chat. I saw you earlier, so thank you for being here. And also, really clever way of framing the question. Instead of saying, "Hey, like, should you do this better?" and me being able to skate with a yes, asking for specific ways is a smart approach. So I think that there's a number of different things that we can do. One thing that was raised, I think, in a different thread that I saw was like a question of, oh, hey, would you be willing to be interviewed by an influencer? And assuming, that's cool with Cord and other folks internally, I personally have no issue with that approach. And I think that there's definitely opportunities for stuff like that. I think that the biggest thing that we can do is help clear Cord's calendar so that he can focus more on helping content creators and improving your social media. The reality is that like we pull Cord in a lot of different directions internally. Like we mentioned with some of the legendary server stuff, that's work that he graciously picked up that he wasn't anticipating doing. So if we're able to spend, and we are working on that, to be clear, it's not like it's just a thing that I'm saying. We have folks who are stepping in to take over that piece. So Cordas doesn't have to do it in the future. But off the top of my head, those are the things that I would think of. I think that we can be more engaged. I'm trying to myself be more engaged and look at different different areas. I'm looking at YouTube, I'm looking at Twitch, I'm looking at the forums, I'm looking at Reddit, I'm looking at Discord. I'm sure there's other areas. I know that there's fan websites and stuff like that that I'm trying to become more familiar with. There's a lot of stuff. But yeah, we can do better. And honestly, I would love to hear from you and others, like, what are the things that you think would be good for us to do? Because you probably have some ideas, some of which we could do.
I would just, if I could piggyback a little bit on that,
Yeah,
it is
please.
important to recognize that, especially over the years, as people sort of join the team and come and go, you're going to have some people who are more comfortable in a visual space like this than others. And we have had a few periods in the Lotro history over the years where we didn't have a whole lot of people who were really comfortable wanting to be on camera and be on interviews. Not because they were afraid of it or anything, it really wasn't their thing, and they weren't really comfortable with being on camera like that. And we've had certainly community managers and that, people in my position that did fill those roles, but we've had over the years kind of a ebb and flow, as it were, in terms of people's willingness to just frankly be like, well, okay, I mean, I've got 3 kids and a wife and this other stuff I have to do, but hey, at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, I'm gonna join your stream. That sort of thing is great, and a lot of times we can also pre-record it, of course, nowadays, and things like that. But I do think it's important to recognize that there is a certain amount of ebb and flow where we need to recognize that we ask these employees to put 8 hours toward their systems design work too, and if we're going to pull them off to a lot of say content creator interviews, there is a cost associated with that. That
Yeah.
said, there is also, yes, plenty of opportunity to do more of that. I think especially in over the past year or two, we've gotten more comfortable being on live streams, and we're doing more and more of this kind of thing. Another thing I would point out is we've had discussions about some of the APIs and things like that Twitch is just one of. Twitch, pushes its content creators to leverage the APIs heavily, and, they certainly... API support for Twitch is something that we've talked about over the years, but have not been able to support. That would allow that for that one platform, right? And so if you're looking at, okay, well, if we're going to do a Twitch API, why that one and not also Facebook and
Yeah.
YouTube and all the others?
That's sort of the classic thing of,
right?
Like,
and
you
so
start doing one and it snowballs.
yeah, especially if you're heavily invested in a specific platform or something, some of those things are great. Like, I'd love to do Twitch drops and that sort of thing, but we at to this point have not really been in a position to incorporate that API specifically into our game engines. And that is
Yeah, and
ultimately
generally
what you'd be asking about.
integrating modern APIs into our old game engine is not the easiest thing. It's hard to do with modern game engines. I spent a lot of time dealing with, social ad, content creation SDKs at previous games, and those could become huge morasses. Which is unfortunate. And those were generally modern games that were developed on modern engines with modern tools, and we don't have a lot of that same stuff. So it's a bigger task for us to do. I know a lot of those feel like they should be kind of plug and play, but the reality is that unless you're building with that stuff in mind as you're going, it's a lot of custom work.
Yeah. That said, there are also opportunities that, as time permits, especially, we would like to do more kind of reach out with our content creator community. I mean, that's where the lifeblood of this stuff is happening online, right? Not that there isn't a lot of great value and more formal press and all that sort of thing, but hey, anyone who's looked at the internet the last 5 years know where this stuff's happening, right? And it's on your YouTubes and Twitch and others that may have come and gone over the years, things like that, right? And so we want to definitely make sure that we recognize that, hey, it's you folks that are spreading the word to your communities and hanging out online, and we really appreciate that. So we do want to do as much of that as we can.
Yeah.
All right, next question. What about crowdfunding?
Yeah, so there was actually a similar question sort of asked, I think, earlier that we skipped over just because there's a lot of them about doing like a design contest kind of thing and rewarding players. So they're sort of similar in the sense that The answer is not that there's totally impossible. There's legal considerations that we have to be super mindful of. There's brand considerations we have to be super mindful of. But theoretically, it is not in the realm of impossibility. That said, speaking for myself personally, and I'm not the person who makes the decision on either of these things, I have an issue with this kind of stuff because it tends to take advantage of fans. A lot of companies, I've been the kind of person that I've contributed to Kickstarter where it's very clear that this is not a developer that actually needs this money, and they're doing it for basically for marketing. I've been guilty of that myself. Homeworld 3, hoping for next year. But the reality is that a lot of these are exploitative in a lot of ways, where this is valuable work. And there are risks involved, and to ask fans to take on those risks is just not a model that I'm particularly comfortable with, whether it's talking about a specific piece of design or art or a broader thing like asking people to give money.
We just saw in the recent video game development space, too, that just throwing money at a problem, so to speak, does not necessarily fix the timeline issue if that's there. You can double the size of your team and get a 10% boost in speed, as it were.
Yeah, that's a good example of it. I mean, and especially with our stuff, it's probably less than that for most things. Crowdfunding, especially, like I think that there is not people don't have a really good understanding of how expensive stuff actually is. Like most video game Kickstarters are not. They're not actually funding the game. They're funding like a really small piece, and they're usually using it as a marketing vehicle. And for smaller games, that's totally understandable, and that's fine. For bigger companies, like we're a bigger, more established company in a lot of those cases, especially with Daybreak and EG7. I just don't think that that's a kosher model, and I'm not a fan of it.
All right, let's move on. It was somewhat suggested there would be further classwork between now and Update 31, whilst what we saw during U30 was definitely a leg up of what we've had for the past year or so. It still left us with unanswered questions. Are we at some point planning to do more classwork? Basically, are we going to do more classwork before U31, and if not, when?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned with Lore Master Pets, that's something that we're looking at. There's other things we're looking at. I don't remember specifically the list off the top of my head. It's not going to be probably as big. We've actually been reasonably happy so far with what we've seen from the class balance situation since the stuff we did for U30. We'll keep looking at it and see how that goes, especially when we unlock T4 and T5 for Fall of Khazad-dûm. But as it is right now, we have a couple things that we're going to be poking at, and we think that we'll be getting more classes further in line and opening up some additional specs for some classes that we did some work on but didn't quite get all the way through. I think Red Bjorny actually was one of them that this person calls out. But nothing I can announce specifically beyond what I just said.
I don't. We're going in order, but I'm sorry, Hallandil. I don't think we have good answers to your questions, do we? I think the answer is we could take a look at it, and I don't think we are, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to the updating instance question that we had earlier. That was sort of asking the same kind of stuff. It's something that we honestly will need to do. I mean, my focus right now is sort of thinking about where are the places where the game is falling over a little bit. And I think that this is a case that you're calling out correctly. There are issues. But right now, I think I want us to focus on, for next year, I'm hoping that we'll be able to focus on the sort of intro experiences, the sort of the 1 through 20 experience a bit more. That said, those players who start at 1 through 20, if we keep them around successfully by making that experience better, they're eventually going to get into the other areas where we have issues. So it's not a case of, we will never do this. It's just a question of getting to that point. And I think that the issues at the early game right now for most players are generally worse, not in the same sense that you're talking about with necessarily the drops and reward structures, but with just the experience more broadly. But as we go up that chain, we will have the opportunity to look at that stuff. To speak about crafting fixes, stat updates, and fixes to NPCs' currencies for Treebeard and Shadowfax, the answer is no. That's not the intention with Treebeard Shadowfax, and that's not something we plan to address. But as we're starting to take time to think about the broader rework of the early and mid-game experience, and that will definitely be a part of it.
I'm going to skip that follow-up question on the interest of time. I think it would be a recap of kind of what you said earlier. how many new raids, dungeons worth of development time would it take to basically retroactively create new loot tables and such for existing scaled raids and instance clusters?
So the first thing I'll say is that raids dungeons not necessarily equivalent to time units, and also they're not time units that I'm necessarily used to thinking about. So the conversion here is probably going to be pretty sloppy, and I'm not going to look at it directly from that perspective. What I will say is like it's trickier to go back and fix old stuff than just to create a new thing, because a new thing you have full control over, you totally understand as you're making it. An old thing you have to go back, and the best case scenario is you were the person who did it, and it's like, okay, I have to put back myself in the headspace of where I was 5 years ago or whatever. For a lot of this stuff, though, a lot of the people who did a lot of this work are no longer on the team and haven't been on the team for quite some time. So, maybe the documentation's there, maybe it isn't. We have no idea. So it'd be a lot of time to just go back and figure out, well, like, how do these things even work? And spend a lot of time really, really doing that kind of thing to bring it up to speed to where we would want it with like a modern standard. So it's not a super cheap or easy thing. It's something that we will do very piecemeal, and it's not something that we can do at a high level for everything very soon.
Let me say though, we have, especially in recent years as we've been Standing Stone Games and everything. I mean, really from the start, when we incorporated an SSG here, a lot of that bringing back the veteran team was to kind of talk to that point, but also to there was been a bunch of stuff in recent years where we've had to say like, all right, welcome X person, guess who gets to read up on XY system, enjoy. So we do that work, but it is something that has to be kind of budgeted and done very carefully.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that the people who would spend the most time benefiting from the changes that we would make to that older stuff are players who are still leveling through that, newer players who we would have to keep and get to that point, or players who are rolling alts, or I guess technically players who want to go back and re-experience that content, but at a higher level. And there's a lot of other problems that those players run into before we even talk about instances and raids at those levels.
We only have a few minutes left, so I don't want to get into a big side topic about how we can improve communication and all that. Hopefully, rather than talk about what we should do, I would rather you just see us do it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the stuff that you're seeing us do sort of answers that question.
Yeah. We've already talked really about the 4K graphics overhaul as part of the UI work that we did, so perhaps we can pass by that question as well.
I think we actually managed to get through the whole page.
We did.
We're
almost a third done. Impressive. Let's see, yeah. Well, we already talked about LI. Kind of the hard, impossible difficulty on a server. That's
yeah. I mean,
we've
got 10 tiers right now that we're talking about. I mean, 9 if you're not including normal, I think. So that's a lot of opportunities. If that is not enough, we can think about that, and we'll see how many players are running into that issue. But like, if you're a really amazing player, or you're grouping up a bunch and you're playing at the highest difficulty levels, you're able to get through that stuff. That's awesome. Super happy for you. Really impressed at what you're able to accomplish. But we don't expect that that's going to be a ton of players. So. It's just the issue is just like, if we're only supporting it for a handful of players, we have to be really mindful of the time that we're devoting to it.
All right. We just have time for another couple questions with 2 minutes, so let me try to just kind of skip a few that we can answer fairly quickly. Any plans to revisit epic battles, skirmishes, or mounted combat?
So the answer is I'd like to, because a lot of players still run into those systems and they're part of the game. It's sort of similar to the conversation around like improving the mid tiers of the game. It's something we want to do, but it's not something we can do imminently. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of things that need to be done for those systems, and those systems, a lot of them are abandoned. So we would be picking up from several years ago of development.
Further Mac support in the future? Question mark.
We have no plans at this point to support Mac. Maybe if we're able to scale our team, and we'll have the resources to do that again. But at this point, it's just it's a big headache. We just dropped support for Windows XP. That was a long time coming. So it's not something that is a switch we can flip, unfortunately.
All right. Yeah, this actually sounds like a pretty good last question here. What are our PVMP goals for about the next half a year here?
So the goal is for the big one really is like we made a promise that we were going to go back, revisit, and update it. And we want to deliver on that. You know, it's something that I said I think on my first stream that it's something that I wanted to commit to, and it's something that I still have every expectation that we will hit. I still think that U31 is the plan for that. Of course, that might slip. I'm not committing us to anything here, but that's still the expectation as far as I'm aware. And then past that, it's evaluating and understanding, okay, what are the opportunities for us to improve this and potentially, you know, what is the value of resurrecting the system, right? We think that there is value, but how much of it, what is it, how much of it exists, what are the limitations on it? And then figuring out, okay, what are the resources that we can devote to it? Is this something that we can support in a bigger way moving forward? We do have some ideas around cool places that we can do things with PVMP. We don't want to lose sight of it, but we don't have any hard sense yet of what that is. Right now, it's mostly about let's get things more or less back on track. It's been a long time coming to get just the basics really in a usable, practical way. And then beyond that, really having a conversation around what does the future of this thing really look like and having an honest reckoning around it.
I can tag that with saying that, you know, early this year we had talked and introduced you to a developer who said, hey, once I'm done with some work that I'm currently doing, I'm going to be doing a little bit of work on the PVMP side. And that person ended up, they're still doing the work, so they haven't fully committed to that PVMP work, but that is still happening. And that will be happening later this year. They are shifting over. They just got delayed by a few months, basically, due to the needs of production.
Yeah, we were in a meeting with them discussing that stuff just last week, so it's not like it's been completely forgotten. It's just the plan has not shifted in terms of the overall date. We're just going to see what that is, and we don't know exactly what it is at the moment.
Yeah. All right. I think we're going to wrap it up right there. Any kind of final comments here?
So thank you everyone for all the questions. I think there were a lot of really good ones. I know we ended up having to skip a few at the end. I will try and find some time over the course of this next week to answer more questions within this thread. That said, I'd love to do this again. Maybe not ask questions in the Reddit and the forum, excuse me, but maybe ask questions in other forums like
idea, by the way.
Twitch or something.
You said Reddit out loud. I actually
I did say Reddit out loud.
Well, we should do that. We should drop a Q&A on the Locha Reddit and just kind of do what we're doing here for that sometime. So.
Yeah, that's something I'd love to do again.
Yeah.
You know, the cadence that Cord and I talked about was like every 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what we'll stick with.
Yeah.
We're sort of doing it ad hoc at the moment, but I think that's still a reasonable plan. So next time you'll see me.
A lot of this live stream is kind of ad hoc. You know, let's be real
most
here.
Things in life.
Yeah, I'm rolling into it at about 9 o'clock in the morning, going, all right, this is what I'm doing today. Now let's figure out what I'm doing today. But but in this case, of course, we were pretty well planned for it and such like that. So, and we do have plans to bring it back. Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
well. No, go ahead.
I just want to say real quick, thank you so much, Cord, for taking the time to do this, and thank you all for observing. I know there was a note that I saw at one point about someone asking for a transcription of the stream. That's unfortunately not something we're going to be realistically able to do. Mm-hmm. But if there are some kind people on this chat who are willing to note all the things that I said and maybe watch the VOD just to double check it, and put that on the forums, then I think that there will be a lot of players who are really grateful for your work.
In particular, I have found that, although not perfect, YouTube's automatic subtitling works pretty well for this kind of work. So if you really
it'll get you like 80%.
If you're need a text version for whatever reason, it'll get you most of the way there. And we'll see what we can do there. So, all right, well, thanks everyone. I hope you're having fun with the Midsummer event. Hope you're having fun with Update 30. I know we've got like everything. I've seen people beating Tier 2 of the new raids. I don't think I've personally heard of a Tier 3 getting beat on.
I think that there was one.
Was there?
I believe it was a European kin.
Okay.
But I don't remember for sure.
All right. Anyway, we've got some people doing some tough raiding this weekend and all sorts of other good stuff with Blood of Azog, along with, of course, the Midsummer event. So hope you're having a great weekend here, and we'll talk to you again next week.